Welcome to Improv Your Parenting, the art of turning parenting into play. Today, we're joined by Kat Koppett. Kat is the eponymous founder of Koppett, a consultancy specializing in the use of improv and storytelling techniques to enhance individual and group performance. She's the author of Training to Imagine, Practical Improvisational Theater Techniques to Enhance Creativity, Teamwork, Leadership, and Learning, and the co-author of The Facilitation Advantage with Teresa McClough. Her diverse client list includes Apple, Prezi, PwC, NASA, Global Giving, the United Nations, and Havas Health. Kat is the co-director and a performing member of the MOPCO Improv Theater, a founding member and the vice president of the Applied Improvisational Network, and a certified ITI improvisation instructor. You can find more information about Kat at www.koppett.com. Kat Koppett, thank you so much for agreeing to talk with us on how to improv your parenting or play with kids. I would like to ask you first, what is your interaction using improv with children?
So my most important experience improvising with children is that I have a daughter, and she is now 21 years old. She just got her first acceptance into a doctoral program. So that's where she is in her life.
Wow.
I'll use any excuse to sort of right on that.
Proud, actually.
All her. And I guess the other thing that I would say about that, we can get into it, is her father and I have, I think pretty successfully, she's doing all right, co-parented. Mm-hmm. But our marriage ended when she was about 5. So there were a lot of different ways that I had to sort of improvise. That just added a whole other layer to it. That can be a little, I don't know, we can pull on that thread if you want.
Yeah, actually, if you don't mind, I'd love to.
Sure.
Yeah.
My other experience with children is that in our theater, the MOPCO Improv Theater, we have taught at various times workshops for children. We started a youth improv troupe at some point, and we do lots of birthday parties, and we do lots of work in schools.
Wow. So you have the lived experience and you have the training experience on both sides of that. Let's talk about the personal experience, because that's usually a very, it's a rich territory to work in. Yeah. Tell me about that sort of navigating, if you don't mind, sort of the change in relationship dynamics between you and your husband, the co-parenting, and how you were able to use improv with your, at the time, 5-year-old child to sort of work your way through what must have been a very challenging time.
Well, I think as I hear myself say that, one of the things it did for me is help me realize that I had to improvise more than I thought. You know, I wasn't in the scripted scene that I thought I would be in. And that was true really for her whole life. I there's a whole other conversation about improvising with my ex, like how we chose to co-create and co-parent. I had a new relationship later. It's just been a very improvisational family when you blend your families. And the gift of that, I think, is that going in that there isn't a script. It isn't the sort of picture perfect, just check the boxes, or everything's always going to be what you expect kind of way. Maybe I'll start with a story that I remember right about the time that we split up, which was I was moving into a little apartment from this big house that we had bought not that long before. And it felt very important to me that Leah feel comfortable there and that it was a home and that it was happy for her. And my mother also wanted that and bought her all this beautiful new pristine white Pottery Barn furniture for her room. And first of all, kids don't care that much about furniture, but also I get the sense that she probably was like, okay, you can't bribe me with nice stuff. But one day she woke up and she said, Mom, I had this dream. I want to paint my dresser. Now, as I say, this is a pristine white, very expensive Pottery Barn that my mother bought, and my mother's going to come visit us. But I was like, okay, sure. I had enough yes and improv impulse in me to say, sure.
Yeah.
What color would you like to paint it? Or let's make a design. She was like, no, I just want to paint it. I want to do it myself. right? So she was coming as like improv, like, I'm just going to go. So I was like, okay.
Let's see what kind of happens.
Yes. So a couple of friends came over who had a little bit more artistic ability than I did. And we painted her dresser, and somewhere I can probably find a picture of it that I can send to you if you want.
Oh, awesome.
But suffice it to say that I had found this like acrylic paint set that a colleague of mine had or given me. And so it had every color that you can possibly imagine. And it was chaos. There were flowers and faces and just like smears of color. And I kind of sat on the bed half the time with my fist in my mouth going like, oh no, what have I done? My mother's going to kill me. And then we stepped back and I said, so Leah, what do you think? And she said, Mom, you made my dream come true.
Oh my God. Yes. That's glorious. You did it.
And I was like, yeah. Like, yeah. So that's the power of improv and the power of just sort of leaping in and seeing what happens, I guess.
Yeah. So the improv then in your experience allowed you to say, even though this feels uncomfortable, I'm going to go with it.
Yeah. And I do talk about, the principle of yes and is complicated. And when I teach it in organizations, I'm very clear to say yes and doesn't always mean you have to agree.
Yeah.
There is a world in which someone might have had a really deep, strong value about the furniture staying white and pristine.
Sure.
And had to find another way to sort of accept and build. Being an improvisational parent doesn't mean you have to let your kids draw all over your walls. In my case, the deep value that what I was trying to yes and was her feeling heard and valued and supported, and a sense of control and ownership and expression, especially in that moment. I think it was really important for her to claim her space.
Yes.
So I was able to go like, who cares if it's white or not? Who cares if my mother's going to yell at me, right? This is the goal.
Yeah. And so I guess the being able to sort of reprioritize, what are the things that are really valuable in this moment?
Yeah.
And then letting those come to the surface and letting go of other things that might be considered valuable, like the color of the furniture itself. Yeah.
That's right. What I love about what you just said is the sort of awareness of what scene am I in?
Yeah.
How do I make my partner look good? How do I support my partner in this moment, in this scene, right? So a time when I might not agree with her is if she's like, let's go take the dog and play in the middle of traffic. Right? Yes, and here's roller skates. But there is in there maybe something that I can yes and. Oh, you want to have an adventure.
Yeah.
Oh, you want to feel, maybe we'll go to an amusement park. Or, oh, you want to get my attention by saying something crazy. Or, you want to feel free. Like what is the offer that's in there that I can accept and build with? And that's different depending on the context of the moment and the kid.
Yes, definitely. Wow. So what an amazing story of acceptance and let's see where this goes. And the honor that it gave your daughter to own that experience. Mm-hmm. And that dresser and that is so hers.
Yeah.
The agency there is beautiful. If I may, how'd your mom take it?
The honest answer is I don't remember, which means it was probably fine, which is another, good lesson, right? What are the stories that we make up? What are the ways we block ourselves?
Yes.
For our children, because we're creating a narrative of what's going to happen, or we're trying to plan ahead to control or fix, when in fact, most of the stories, a lot of the stories we make up aren't true.
Totally. Yeah. So actually that gets into an area that I wanted to ask about is your growing up experience. Was improv a part of that? Was play a part of that in any way?
That's such a good question. I think my parents were very supportive in all sorts of ways. I was very privileged in all sorts of ways. They did yes and me in sort of major ways. Like I said, I want to graduate high school a year early and go off to acting school because I know I'm ready for that. And they said yes. There were, and they drove me to classes and they, so I can't say no. Mm-hmm. And the culture that I grew up in this sort of 20th century New York liberal Jewish household was a very no culture, right? Really? Okay. The sort of way you played was to debate. The first impulse, I think, when someone would say we would laugh in our family that like, no matter how much we agreed on politics and we were all very aligned, we could still find something to argue about. Like whatever trying to and on a more serious note, I think that there was also a way that I was blocked a lot, that my impulses or I don't even know what to call it. There was just a lot of judgment. Okay. And a lot of control in the house. I remember the story that's coming to mind is I had a friend in high school who was diagnosed with leukemia. And I remember calling her on the phone. She was in the hospital and I called her just to call her. And my mother was sitting there right on the bed. And I said to her, my friend on the phone, "I'm so sorry, Sarah. I don't know what to say." My mother, like sitting on the bed, was like, "No, don't say that. What do you?" And then I wanted to go visit her, and my mother was like, "No." And so there was just a lot of like whatever my authentic impulse. And there's nothing. I mean, in the improv world, right? I don't know what to say is the perfect sort of daring to be obvious.
Yeah. You give it out there, yeah.
Right? Like there's nothing to say. And she certainly received it well. And I think my mother even later said, no, that was fine. But there was a lot of that kind of impulse. Like I was sort of taught to judge myself and other people.
And how did you then work your way past that to be able to offer sort of that open space to your daughter and your life as it unfolded?
Well, I went off to acting school and I was in conservatory, which is also a very, at least it was back then, a very sort of antithesis of improv, judgment. Let's break you down and tell you everything that's wrong with you. It's not a very...
Wow, sounds awful.
Yeah, it was pretty bad. But I had acting teachers who kept saying to me really stupid things like, "You're too smart to be an actor," or "Don't think," right? This was the U.S. conservatories, back then when it was all very, method. And that's terrible teaching. Yeah. But there was something that they were pointing to that I ultimately was trying to figure out, which was that there was this judgment voice in my head. Right? And that I was trying to sort of intellectualize and that I wasn't really trusting my impulses and my body. I got very lucky. I was in a theater company and someone knew someone who knew someone, and an improviser from Chicago City Limits in New York, Carrie Summer, did a masterclass with us. And a lot of the actors were too cool for school. But said to me, she said, "Oh, you're good at this. You should do this." And the reason I was good at it was not because I was funny or anything else, but she was giving me guidelines. She was giving me exercises where the rules were pretty clear to exercise my spontaneity, to exercise my listening and support it, right? She was teaching me how to do what my acting teachers were just telling me I should do without teaching me how, which is saying I wasn't doing it.
So, and it's almost impossible to do that way. Yeah. Right. Yeah. And that brings up an idea in my head of that structure that she was giving you that enabled you to do those exercises to work on that spontaneity. That's actually something I've heard a lot from other improvisers. It's not that, hey, I'm just thrown into this thing and I don't know what's going to happen. It's that I've practiced to be able to do this stuff. Can you talk a little bit about those exercises you did in that practice and how maybe that has influenced how you have interacted with your daughter and with the kids that you've trained?
Yeah. So one of my great mentors I still work with her, a woman named Laura Livingston, who's the artistic director of Freestyle Repertory Theater in New York. It's a theater sports company. We also created Spontaneous Broadway there. Ken Adams, who many of your listeners may know, who created the Story Spine and all sorts of other things, was working there then. And Laura has said two things that have stuck with me, and then I'll talk about the activities. One was, she said, my job as the director, is to build the jungle gym so that you can swing on it.
Nice.
I think, when we talk about parenting or dealing with children, that's so important. In some ways, children don't need the sort of exercise of following their impulses, right? That muscle is more accessible to children in some ways than it is to adults. Yeah. But being able to build a structure that allows them to express themselves and feel safe and feel focused so that they can direct that energy is one of the things that I think is important as a parent, right? It makes it safe to be free and expressive if you have a safe container. If you don't have a safe container and you have to be responsible for your own boundaries, it's hard to be expressive and grow and try and risk, right?
Yes.
The other thing she said is there's an infinite number of numbers, 1, 2, 3, 4, right? There's also an infinite number of numbers between 1 and 2.
Okay.
And I think what that means to me and why I think of it a lot is when we talk about improvising, yes, anding, responding, serving the scene, it isn't an absolutely anything goes. It's like, here's the boundary, here's this circle of possibility we're playing in. And within that, how can we be as present and responsive and playful and expressive as we can be? Again, in terms of parenting, like how do you, that structure or that boundary actually can be very inspiring and safe and supportive of creativity, as opposed to just like, there are no boundaries.
Yeah. And so what it sounds to me like you're talking about then is you create a safe environment and you create here's sort of as far as we can go, the guardrails. So we're not going to go running into the street like you talked about. Right. But we can have fun in this space in whatever way stays in this space.
Right.
Yeah.
And if I create a safe environment, then you can play and I don't have to be like, no, don't touch that. Wait, no, don't do that.
Exactly.
Right? Because the boundary is created, it is safe, right? Like if I cover the plugs, you're not going to stick your tongue in them. Yes. And I have to be like vigilant about, oh no.
And so then we as the parent, guardian, trainer in whatever way, are allowed to also take a step back from that oversight into the, how do I interact?
Right.
Yes.
That's right. We make it safe for ourselves by making it safe for the child, because our job is to be vigilant, right? And protective and directive in some ways, right? Yeah. Because we are coming into the scene with more power and experience and all of those things.
That's wonderful advice. I love the metaphors you were able to use there, especially the jungle gym. That to me was, I could see it in terms of kids playing at a playground and having that ability to just climb all over that thing, jump off to whatever, but yet, it's not an open flame that they're going to burn themselves. Right. And so I love that. I want to transition now to the training you've done through the theater and through the working with kids on how to do this for themselves. Can you talk a little bit about that and what that looks like and how kids have interacted with that?
Yeah, I mean, in some ways, it's exactly what we were talking about. And you were asking about activities. When you're doing an improv class for younger people, and of course, teenagers are different from girls, from 4-year-olds, right? They're very different stages of development. But one of the things that's true, especially for younger kids before you're a teenager, is that your censoring muscle is often less overly developed, right? Okay. Yeah. So there are ways that kids are more in touch with their spontaneity, their expressiveness, their willingness to play, their willingness to look silly, right? To use their bodies, all of those things that as we get into like middle school, we start to, lots of internal and external pressure to shut that down. So for those populations, the yes anding, right? What's needed as a guide is to build these structures, to sort of focus the energy and direct it, right? So how can we, you're going to be you're an animal, you're going to use your body running around all of that. How do we translate that into being an animal? Or a slow motion samurai fight, right?
Yes.
How do we focus on receiving from our partner, right? And using what we're getting instead of just being by ourselves and playful. The games, and there are a million of them, right? Encourage people to take risks and fail and support each other, because very early we start to feel shame about making a mistake. So that's part of the game. It teaches collaboration. How do I work with you to co-create instead of just going off and doing my own thing? Mm-hmm. I think one of the things that's true in both the classes that we teach and the shows that we put on, and true of being a parent, is that there isn't a right answer. And who the child is, who my partner, the kid is, really depends what's needed.
Yeah.
So, for example, to go back to parenting for a minute, my daughter is very organized. She's very disciplined. She loves like taking ballet class, where there were very strict rules and very strict technique and very strict boundary, and she got very harsh feedback. And one of the reasons she probably liked that was because I'm less like that. And she was living in two households, and my household was kind of chaotic, and I was traveling, and I was running an improv theater, and she came and improvised with us. But the sort of discipline and structure and focus, which is what make her a wonderful doctoral student and professor, was something she wanted and needed, but also provided for herself. As her mother, one of the things that I was providing, and her dad also provided, one of the things I was providing was trying to get her in touch with her preferences and needs and desires, as opposed to just how do I please other people or how do I do it right from the outside. Yeah. And I sort of followed her in terms of what kind of parent I needed to be and what I needed to provide. The same is true in an improv class. Providing enough structure and control, really, right? Discipline, that if they're wild kids all over the place, you can focus them and channel their energy. But also this kid needs, to work on focus. And this kid needs to work on self-expression. And the group needs to work on creating the group dynamic where everybody feels included.
And so then you're able to sort of engage each kid with the area that they can then sort of blossom from, or to, I guess. And it sounds like with that then is you don't come in with you're all going to be X. Instead, you come in with, who are you? And how do I help you be more of that, whatever that is?
I mean, I think if you wanted to summarize this whole project you're doing into one sentence, I would encourage that to be the sentence.
Oh, really?
Pay attention to our partner, that really being an improvisational parent or caregiver, teacher, is about paying attention to your partner, receiving offers from them, and then accepting and building with that and offering back.
Yes.
There isn't a right way to be a parent, but that, and there are a billion improv skills we could talk about, but really that's it. How do I accept and build with what my partner's giving me in the scene that we're in, and offer something back that's useful?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's sort of a key lesson for parenting and a key lesson for any kind of interaction, honestly. In the workplace and in growing up. I love that you're able to distill it down to sort of this key element, in that one of the things that you were able to do with that, though, is that you respected, particularly you talked about your daughter, recognizing she needed structure as well as that sense of self. And to be able to combine those for herself, and you to recognize, I don't need to stand in the way of that. Actually, I want to enable that, even though that's not the thing I'm giving.
Yeah, absolutely. I remember having a conversation once about, it feels to me like the conversation we have about parenting a lot, sort of societally, is discipline versus permissiveness.
Yeah.
And that's an axis. But I think there's another axis that in some ways is even more important, which is it child-centered or adult-centered? For whose benefit And I think if you have discipline, if you're sort of a harsh disciplinarian or you're very strict because it's easier for you, or because you don't want to be ashamed in public, or like, that can sometimes be not so good, right?
Yeah.
It can be restrictive, it can be punishing, it can be shaming, all of those things.
Yeah.
But there are lots of people who are very disciplined and very strict because it's child-centered, right?
Yeah.
For me in my life, it was her ballet teacher. Her ballet world gave her that. I know a lot of folks send their kids to martial arts programs, and that's, that the teaching of the discipline is very important and very much about the child and the child's development. It's true on the other side too. If I'm being permissive because I'm too lazy, there are plenty of times with our kids when it is way easier not to set a boundary.
Yeah.
I know that I fell into that trap all the time. Like, oh no, she's gonna be mad at me, or I really wanted her to like me, or like it would be great to have the same pattern of everything. But I was very lucky that my child, in some ways, led with, wanted that. I didn't have to fight with her a lot when I set boundaries. She was very compliant. I actually had to test that she wasn't just doing or saying something because she thought it was the right thing to do.
Yeah.
But anyway, so that I think if I'm focusing on my partner, making my partner look good, which as a parent, of course, means helping them be healthy and growing and developing and actualizing themselves, sort of disciplined, permissive shifts depending on the moment and depending on the child.
Yeah. And one of the things you bring up there that I think is really important too is as you focus on them, so in that upper half of the 4 squares, things are probably going to be far more successful than if you're focusing on you.
Mm-hmm.
And so that would be something I would want to take out to parents everywhere is it's not about you. It's about them.
And it's so hard. And, improv, it's one of the things that we practice in improv, right? It's one of the principles. Focus on your partner, make your partner look good, delight your partner. And it's both the hardest thing to do because, of course, we all are focused on ourselves and want to look good. And, we read all the parent books ahead of time. And we have a community of parents who are judging us, like in the schoolyard and all that. Yeah. But it's also so freeing for yourself to say, like, if I'm actually paying attention to what you need, it frees me up to bring my best self without just focusing on how do I look, what do I want, right? It's actually very fulfilling.
Yeah, you're not even thinking about that. You're thinking about the other person, you're engaging them, and then you sort of completely forget that you exist almost, even though you're being taken care of because that's what they're doing with you.
Right.
Yeah.
I hear us talking about this, and I want to be clear, it's like we also live in a world where especially mothers have this pressure to be sort of perfect and always available. It's a funny, I hear us saying it, and I want to make sure that, again, I say that doesn't mean don't take care of yourself, right? It doesn't mean be harder, but it's that when and how you engage with your child, even, saying like, I need to model setting a limit, or I need to model caring for myself. That can also be something that you're doing in service of the child. I know I'm sort of bouncing around a little bit. Saying this, I remember talking to a coach. I was being coached when I was doing my coach certification. Mm-hmm. And we were talking somehow about parenting. And I said, my child comes first. Her needs and benefits are absolutely my paramount concern. And I will, have to make choices based on that. And she said to me, really? Like, that's the number one thing? And I was like, really? That is the number one thing. Like, I was so shocked. He was somehow pushing back on that. And I stand my ground. Like, absolutely, for me, is my number one value and concern. It doesn't mean I didn't take days for myself. It doesn't mean I didn't build my business. It doesn't mean I didn't, but ultimately, fundamentally, she was my main value, responsibility, goal. And I think parents feel like that.
Yeah, it's funny is that I think one of the hardest things for a parent to realize, and it sounds like you did, is like, I need to take care of myself in order to take care of them.
Yes.
But I am no longer the thing. Like, I'm a thing and I'm helping, but they are now the thing. And I'm here to support that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Ideally that is fulfilling, it's not always. And I know that, some parents have a harder job than others, but just like in an improv scene, right? The trick is that if I'm focusing on you, I actually look better and feel better, right? And I think that as parent, I here's another sort of yes-anding example with parenting. Like, there's that terrible twos, and you see all this, like, how do you deal with tantrums to get you? Well, fundamentally, I'm not making this up, it's from books I read. Fundamentally, the way you avoid that is by not getting in the argument, right? By doing sort of the Aikido move of, wow, you're really upset right now, which is just a yes and move. And if I'm focusing on you and what do you need in that moment as the child, it's actually going to be way easier on me than if I'm trying to impose my will without really paying attention to what's going on.
Yeah, it seems like so many of the challenges, and even in my family, that we have are when I forget that it's not about me getting what I want all the time, And we went through those twos, and I agree with you. It was when it worked, it was, well, what do you need? What's going on with you? How are you experiencing this? And when I could solve for that with them, then we didn't have a problem. It was when I was just like, no, we're going to this. And like, okay, that's going to be a problem.
Again, if they're running out in traffic, it doesn't matter. They're having tantrum. You have to see, right? Because the goal, what you're yes-anding, is their physical safety and well-being, right? If I know you're exhausted, you need to go to sleep, even if it's like, no, I don't want to go to sleep. You know that 5 minutes from now you're going to do. So I don't want to be Pollyanna about it. But often you don't have to win an argument, right? You can just go like, yeah, you are really upset about this.
Yeah, one of the other parents I had talked to was talking about how their kid's like, I want ice cream for breakfast. And they're like, well, I have a choice. I could either say no, or I could say, you know what? I want ice cream for breakfast too. But I know when I do that, I really don't feel very good. So why don't we have some cereal?
Or even, great.
Yeah.
Let's have, spinach with our ice cream. If I give you a bowl of sugared cereal, nobody's going to say I'm a terrible parent. All of a sudden I give you ice cream for breakfast. That's we can't do that. There's some story about how we have to block that offer, but why? What's the goal? The goal is I have a certain amount of nutrition. Maybe, I know some parents don't like sugar, and they're not giving the sugared cereal either. But for many of us, it's like, if you said you wanted a Danish for, there's plenty of things. A Pop-Tart.
Yeah.
And say, that's crazy. So what do I need to add to it so that you're also getting protein, right? Or
exactly.
ice cream and peanut butter. I don't know, is a peanut butter and jelly sandwich really that much healthier than
I'm sure they're all very sugared, and they're all going to help you up. Yeah.
Like you say, I'm sure there are plenty of parents who feed their kids way better than any of that stuff. And
I
more
hope so.
power to you. But also, if you're a family that eats ice cream, why not have it for breakfast?
Yeah. If that works for you and you don't get sick, cool. Yeah, totally. So tell me a little bit about your work now. I see the books in the background. What are you doing with those? Tell me about that.
So most of my work is about bringing improv and storytelling techniques to organizations to help expand individual and group performance, awareness, and range. So that means helping people pay more attention internally to what are my habits, what are my set ways of unconsciously and habitually doing things, and when are they helping me in the scene I'm in, and when are they not? And then how do I expand my range of options in any given moment, in any scene I'm in, so that I can be more aligned with my intention, my goals, my values. And that looks like leadership development courses. It looks like a lot of facilitation and train the trainer courses. Our approach to facilitation in the new book, Facilitation Advantage, is that this is a set of skills that really anyone who's ever in any kind of situation to lead or hold a group needs to have, that it's not just a special professional role. So we bring skills, and a lot of them are overlap with improv.
Yeah, one of the things I was thinking about as you mentioned that is, so these lessons are great in the interpersonal experience, they're great in the workspace, and as you're working on it as a parent, you might actually get better at it in those other parts of your life too.
It's all the same. I mean, we
Yeah.
are all improvising all the time. We are doing it successfully or not success. Well, let me go back. I say we're all improvising all the time. And what I mean by that is, we don't have a script for this conversation. We don't wake up and have a script on our bedside table. But it's also true that that a lot of the time we go by rote. We sort of perform in our lives in scripted ways. Mm-hmm. And when we can raise our consciousness, use a 1970s word, about what are my habits, where are they serving me and not, and then how do I expand my options? Mm-hmm. That is useful, as you say, everywhere. Every time I do an organizational development, team building program, or communication skills or influencer storytelling, people say, oh, I'm going to use this with my spouse. Oh, yes. This is so good with my kids.
Exactly.
It's the same. They are the same muscles. They're the same skills.
Yeah. Yeah. And so you practice it in one domain, it'll carry over into others and maybe make your life easier in lots of places. Yeah. Once you've really exercised it and you're able to do that well. That's really cool to think about because it's not just a one-off and one target. It's a whole life improvement experience. And in theory, you have a better relationship with your kid in the process.
Yeah.
Wow. That's really cool. I'm going to start wrapping this up. So I wanted to ask you one last question, if you will, is if you're talking to a new parent and they're like, I don't know what to do, what might you suggest to them as an approach to sort of open this space for them?
My first impulse is to go like, well, congratulations, because you have moved beyond the phase of thinking you will know what to do, which can get you stuck. And then I think my favorite improv lesson right now that I would offer is just the next one thing. That you don't have to know what the whole scene is going to be. You can't plan for the future because you don't know what it's going to be. But if you're paying attention and you're receiving, right? If you're listening deeply and paying attention, and let's just do the next one thing that, as we build our scene with our child, brick by brick. Right now, my child is crying and has a wet diaper. I can do that. Mm-hmm. Right now, they need to be fed. Right now, they're trying to pull up on the table and then I can clap for them. And you're not going to know.
Yeah.
And your child is going to teach you if you're paying attention and you'll co-create it. You'll figure it out together.
Yeah.
There isn't one right answer.
I think that's wonderful. And yeah, you'll figure it out together. And it's okay that you don't know.
It's great that you don't know. Because if you thought you knew, you would be wrong. You would be planning ahead and you would be not actually in the moment, present, paying attention.
I love it. Yeah, that's so good. I think that's a wonderful place to end on. Did you have anything you wanted to add or say? Or
I'm just really glad that this conversation is happening. And I think that the more we customize by being present, whatever we're doing, there's always a fad, there's always an argument, there's always a list of the right way to do it. And it's always true that none of us know what's happening tomorrow.
Yes.
But it's especially true right now. So even as we help prepare our children for what's coming, I think part of what we can model for them and help them prepare for is having to improvise and respond in the moment without being able to know what's coming.
That's essential. Yeah, it helps with the sense of resilience and individual strength and confidence that you'll be okay, whatever sort of comes your way.
That's right.
Yeah, I think that's wonderful. Well, Kat, thank you so much. This has been a great conversation. I barely touched most of the questions I had. But I think, maybe we could talk again at some point in the future. I look forward to that. Just thank you so much for being you, for teaching other people how to be there and present, and just, hopefully helping make a better future for all of us in the process. So it's a good thing.
Amen, brother. Back at you.